but it was a big journey for me to get to Emperors, and that's what I want to talk about with you this afternoon. Patricia mentioned cultivating healers, teachers, and leaders. You know, in the classroom, the EF classroom, the big classroom, on the back wall, right, and painted on the wall are the words: healers, period; teachers, period; leaders, period. And you know, when Jock asked me to speak, first thing I saw were those words, and they've really stuck with me, and really thinking about what those words mean. Okay, I'm a Gemini, so I really love words. And words can be misleading because we all have different definitions for words. And so I'm going to share my definitions for these words and share little stories to support my definitions. All right, so the first, healers, okay? And I think the first thing that came up for me as a professional football player is that I was doing a lot of damage to my body. And because football ultimately wasn't my path, I was doing a lot of damage to my soul. And for me, it was this hard moment of really asking myself serious questions and learning to listen to that voice. Listen to that voice. And for me, listening to that voice is the first stage of healing, right? In our culture now, you know, if you complain or if something is wrong with you, there's almost a shame of not that comes along with not being healthy, right? And it's unfortunate because it's that little voice, that pain, that hurt inside of us, which guides us forward in life. And to resolve these things, which some of them we inherit, some of them we pick up on the way, but to find resolution to these things. For me, I think of healing as resolving the past. You know, whether you call it our constitution, right, our gene, what we were born with, we have to work with this, okay? And for me, I was born with a body that was built to be an athlete, but I was born with a heart that was meant to be a healer. And for me, it was a path of getting to a place where I could listen to the voice and trust the voice, right? All the voices on the outside were telling me, go where the money is, you know, become a professional football player, do this. But there was a voice inside of me saying, maybe not. And finally, I was able to listen to that voice. And that voice set me on a path. And I believe as healers, right, when we have difficult cases, or we have things that perplex us, a lot of times the key comes from listening to that voice. And I think for anyone to truly call themselves a healer, there must be a process of healing ourselves first. And so when I listened to this voice, the voice said, you know, maybe you should be doing something else. And so I made the courageous decision to walk away from a lucrative and successful athletic career. And the voice told me next, go on a journey. And so I grabbed my backpack and I went on a journey. And you know, at this moment in my life, the way it manifested was, I was living in Miami at the time, playing for the Dolphins, and I was leaving my condo right on the beach, getting into my Ferrari, and concierge ran out and he said, hey, asked me what was going on, and he had been bugging me to go to some parties, and I'm not really a party type of person, but I was feeling good that day, and so I asked him, I said, are there any parties going on? You know, any parties down on the beach that I can attend? He said, you know, the season is over. You know, in Miami, the season of going out and having fun usually starts in November and ends Memorial Day weekend. This was Memorial Day weekend. He said, the season is over. He said, there's not going to be any more parties here for about 6 months. Contact me then. And I said, okay. And as I got into my car, I kept hearing the words, season is over, season is over. You know? And I started thinking about my life. And for most season of my life, I've been a football player. I've been an athlete. And these words, the season is over, started really resonating with me. And I started to think, is the season of me being a football player over? Right? First thought that came to my mind was, what about the money? What about the fame? What about all these things, right? The voice that rose up from inside, who cares? Shocked me a little bit, but I was learning to trust it. then I started to think about the seasons, really started to think about the seasons, how spring naturally falls into summer, summer goes into fall, and fall goes into winter, and it goes around. And the seasons don't complain that there's a change going on. It's part of nature. Right? And this was a clue to me that there's something that nature can teach us about ourselves. There's something that nature can teach us about life. Right? And so with this support, I decided to make a conscious decision to change the season of my life. And so I called up the NFL, and that famous moment where you tell your boss to take this job and shove it. What a great feeling. and with that, I started my journey. And it's amazing what shows up in your life when you're really willing to listen to that voice. And the first part of this journey was really a healing journey. Not only healing my body, but healing my mind. And so going on my travels, I'm in Australia, and I come across a guy who hands me a book. And it was a book about Ayurveda. And I was a football player. I didn't know what Ayurveda was, but he said it had something to do with seasons. And that word caught my attention. And so I started going through this book and seeing that, there are people at one point in time that actually did live according to nature. And this idea that we can make different choices in our lives that help us live more in tune with nature. And again, going through what I was going through in that moment, that message really resonated. And so I took the book and I started reading. And more of the healing process, right? On this journey, I started meeting different people. And people had no idea that I was famous, had no idea that I was a football player. And so I started to get a more accurate idea of who I was as a person. And what was revealed to me is that I was more intelligent than I thought, and that I had a kind, healing energy to me. Things that I had never heard as a football player. Okay? So there's one point on this trip where I fell in love with Australia, and I decided that I was going to live there for the rest of my life. Obviously, didn't pan out that way. But so part of the process was I went to the local immigration attorney, and I said, what do I have to do to become a citizen here so I can buy this piece of property that I found? And he gave me the paperwork, and I went back to my hostel and I started filling out the paperwork. And I got to a page where you had to list what your skill or your profession was. What skill do you have, okay? And so there's about 150 jobs. And so I started going down the list, and I got to the bottom and I realized I don't have a skill. Football player was not on that list. And I started thinking about my life differently, thinking, okay, the football season of my life is over. What's next for me? And I started reflecting on the experiences that I had my whole life and the experience that I had in the past few months, and thinking of, what do I want to do with my life? Right? There's been some healing, and now there's a question, this curiosity. What do I want to do with my life? And when I flash back on my life, I just saw moments of me talking to people, touching people, helping people. And what rose in my consciousness was, I want to be a healer. And so I started the second part of this talk. I started the learning part, because I think to truly be teachers, we have to have something to teach, and this comes from learning. And I think the impetus for learning is curiosity. And so now that I knew I wanted to become a healer, it was time to learn the skills to get the information that I needed to become a healer. And I started off, so I got back to the States, and I said, I gotta go back to school and figure out what I want to do with my life. And so I went on Google, and this Ayurveda thing was still stuck with me. And so I said, I wonder if there's a place in the States where I can study this. And so I went on Google and I typed in Ayurveda. And of course, there was a program starting in 2 weeks, in Northern California. And so followed my heart and I enrolled in this education. And again, I was 4 months removed from being a jock, a dumb jock at that, and really entered into this whole new world, this whole new way of understanding life and understanding who I was. And I think what stuck with me the most in this beginning part of my education was that in Ayurveda, and it's similar in our medicine, that the root cause of disease is not knowing our true nature. And resonating with me so much at this time. And so I dove in, and one of the beautiful things about this time was learning about the healing power of herbs, of plant medicine. And I think a lot of us that grew up in the West, I know I was front and center, that I thought pills, right? That's what you do. And I had doubts, and through my professional career. I had an ulcer at the age of 19 from taking too many Advil just to practice. And in realizing there's other ways to take care of myself that are more in tune with nature. Again, feeding this curiosity, feeding this learning process. So I started my education in Ayurveda, which led me to become a yoga instructor, studying in India, and really deepening my understanding for my heart, my shin, right? My connection to the universe. And studied a lot of different modalities, but essentially they're all saying the same thing, right? Is this healing process of getting people in touch with their heart, getting people to trust and listen to that voice. And once you listen to that voice, you get information about yourself, right? This is where the curiosity and the learning comes in, right? Pursuing the information that we need to move forward, right? And this model that I'm building, healing again is about resolving the past, getting us into the present moment. And learning and becoming a teacher is about using this present moment to gather the experiences and the information that we need, okay? And the final step, becoming a leader, right? At least in my life, this has been the most daunting and challenging step, right? Because I think in order to truly be a leader, you have to heal, right? You have to learn, you have to have something that you can teach, something that you can lead with, and then you have to take it into the world. One of the things that Patricia talked about is I believe each of us as individuals have a unique individual destiny. Okay? And what I mean by that is we all have a unique perspective. It requires healing, it requires learning, but once we get there, we start to get in touch with our unique way of looking at the world, our unique way of living in the world. Right? And we use what we've learned. We use the skills to individuate. Individuate, part of the hero's journey, right? I come from somewhere and I'm moving into who I'm meant to become here, right? And we can track all of our journeys and we can see how events that happened 15, 20, 30 years ago have led us to this moment, right? And for me, becoming a leader, really becoming a leader, it's been going on the whole time as part of the process, but it came several years ago when I was asked by a teammate of mine to speak at a cannabis conference. And at the time I was living in Texas, and things are a little bit different in Texas than they are in California, and people were giving me a hard time about my history with cannabis. And so I was uneasy, and I said, right now, the way my life is going, I don't think it's a good fit for me to have this conversation. Then I hung up the phone and I started thinking about it. I started thinking about my journey. I started thinking about my past. I started thinking about where I was headed and realized that I wasn't going to let fear stop me. And so I called him back and I said, yes, I'd love to share my story. And so a couple days later, I flew out to Phoenix, and it was the first time that I spoke publicly about my cannabis use. And it was extremely cathartic and it was extremely healing for me to share my story. I think so much of healing, right, comes from not accepting other people's story about who we are or what we're doing, and listen to our heart and listen to and create our own story about what we're doing. And so this experience for me gave me a chance to tell my story. And after I spoke, I walked around the floor, and so many people came up to me and said, thank you for sharing your story. I've been through similar experiences, and the way you handled it has really inspired me to be myself and keep on moving forward. And in this moment, I heard a phrase that my mom often repeated growing up, she said, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated, okay? Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated, right? And to me, this is a big part of becoming a leader, okay? And, to juxtapose this position that I'm in literally right now, I want to go back in the past. I'll go back about 10 years. I'm playing football and one of the best players in the NFL, and the team is going through a rough point in the year. Okay, And I've always been kind of a philosophical guy and always problem solving, right? And thinking about the troubles the team is having. The solution I came up with is, as a team, we all need to meditate together. That we're all in different places and we have different goals. If we could just come together, it could really help our team. And so I was excited as I woke up that morning thinking about, I'm going to go to work today and stand in front of the team and talk about the importance of meditation. Okay? Well, you haven't heard the story. So I get to work, and we usually start every day with the team meeting. And the coach is up and talking about our troubles, and I'm sitting there getting excited about going up in front of the team. And to have an impromptu voice to the team, you have to stand up and say, "Coach, I have something to say." And you'll probably only have 10 seconds to do it in the course of the meeting, right? So Coach finishes talking, and I realized I got my window now to stand up and say something, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't muster the courage to be that different, right? And I say this because part of it was the position I was in. I was still wounded from my past experiences. I didn't have the skill set to be able to bring to the team what I really wanted to, but I had this idea. Here I am sitting in front of you, and how did we start today? With the meditation, And I feel part of being a leader is finding your people. And as you all go out and practice, right, your people are going to come looking for you and find you. And it's on us to be leaders. And as you're equipped with this education, you're in a place to be healers, you're in a place to be teachers, and you're in a position to be leaders. So I encourage all of you on your journey, stand strong, be yourself, and manifest into this world your unique destiny as healers, teachers, and leaders. Thank you.